questions? Thank you. Dr. Thomason, roll call.
President Reese, members of the board, please let the record show that we have 3 board members here tonight. Mr. Rick Thornott was unable to make it, and Mr. Greg Witovich has a previous engagement also. So we have 3 board members here tonight.
Thank you. Right. We'll go on to the approval of the agenda. I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 3-0. We'll go on to consent. I move that we approve consent agenda items 3.2 through 3.13.
Second.
President Reese, members of the board, I just kind of wanted to make a quick note on 310, the amendment regarding our audits and financial monitoring, to kind of give you an idea of what our audits, how many audits we have and how many monitorings we have throughout the entire year, every single year. So this is the stack of what it looks like. So you get an annual financial report, which is comprehensive. You get a USFR, which is a Uniform System of Financial Reporting Requirements, compliance. You also have a single audit that is done, plus you have the Auditor General Classroom Spending Report that is done. Each of those, plus our Medicaid audit. All of those are done on an annual basis to kind of give you guys, give everyone an idea of how many audits the district does go through. Plus, then you have your additional ADE audits that will come up whenever ADE decides it's your turn in the rotation. Does that make sense? So I just kind of wanted to give everybody kind of an idea of exactly what the district does go through. We talk a lot about transparency and making sure that everybody is, has a good understanding of how the district utilizes our funds and trying to be good stewards of those funds. We are monitored several times. Just give everybody an update.
And President Reese and Mr. Holland, thank you for that. And the this proposed language here, just a reminder to people who might be wondering, we can't hire the same auditor more than 3 years in a row. And if we have an auditor, they also can't be a consultant. So it just keeps us all honest and safe and on the same page. And that's what we want.
And those are new laws that were put in place this year.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to participate in some of those audits as well, so they ask a lot of questions.
Yes, they do. We have our current audit going on, our annual audit. This is the last week of it, so hopefully we'll have some ideas, some findings. Hopefully it's good by the end of the week.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions or comments regarding any other consent agenda items?
Madam President, only one.
Mr. Glover?
Well, thanks to Dr. Thomason and the cabinet. I always send in, like I'm sure you guys do too, a bunch of questions. So those were all answered. The only thing I just thought might be worth pointing out to some of the admins and teachers who are here to pass on, we do have a lot of field trips, and I see great value in them. I think it's good for kids to connect and have relationships in a different way with people. So, but they're pricey, and I looked at the price tag on some of these, and just a reminder that the tax credit, in case parents didn't know, you can use your own, you can use neighbors' tax credits for these things, relatives. I mean, they have to be in the state of Arizona, but But if you had a trip that exceeded your means, you certainly could ask friends and neighbors to also contribute, and it could be directly towards that particular student. I think most of us know this, but it's good to share that with folks, because some of these prices, they can be overwhelming. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess on top of that, Mr. Glover, it's a good reminder. And I want to thank everyone in the district who's been working on the field trips and the field trip requests forms. Several years ago, the board gave a direction regarding field trips and what's appropriate and versus just going somewhere. And I think the administration and the teachers and then the district administration, I think they've done a good job at making it clear what the expectation is. And I want to thank Mrs. Reach for putting in the new policy, or the new process, not policy, for requesting time off, because it does come to us in a clearer form, so we have a better understanding of these trips. And I agree, I think that they are very beneficial. We have leadership trips and wrestling tournaments coming up, so I agree, and I appreciate you mentioning tax credit, because some of these are costly, but it's a really good opportunity for our kids. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 3-0. All right, we're going to go on to our action and information items. 4.1, our fiscal year 19 for the monthly governing report for October. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for you and to your team for putting that together. 4.2, discussion and consideration and direction on voting on one bylaw change proposal and one core belief addition from the Arizona School Board Association. Comments? Mr. Glover.
No, thank you, Madam President. Nothing. I mean, it's fun. They seem fine. They seem reasonable, and so I'm fine with both of them.
I have no issues.
I was waiting for words of wisdom. I was fine with it as well. So I move that we approve the bylaw change and proposal and the core belief addition from ASBA.
Second.
If we don't have anything else, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Mrs. Reach can notify ASBA. All right, 4.3. I move that we approve the 2019-2020 Higley Unified School District Middle School Course Guide.
Second.
Questions or comments regarding the course guide? All right, thank you, Dr. Mallerwine, for putting this all together for us. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 3-0. I move that we approve the 2019-2020 Higley Unified School District High School Course Guide.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the high school course guide?
Well, maybe, Madam President, for those in the audience, we discussed the changes last meeting, so we went over those pretty thoroughly. So.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 3-0. So we are now at our work study presentation. Mr. Witovich did ask if we could potentially take a short recess to allow him to get here. He is doing he has an event at Chandler Gilbert tonight, and he is going to be here by 7 o'clock, and he did ask if we could do a short recess so he could be part of this work study and conversation. So, yes, I do want to put his request forward, so I move that we recess until Mr. Ratovich arrives, or 7 p.m., whichever comes first.
Second.
Any questions or comments, concerns?
Well, to the audience, if you're wondering, I mean, we want to wait for him as well, but some of the business we can't conduct because we don't have a quorum, because our fifth member is not here either. So we apologize. I just live across the way if you guys want to come over for, for 45 minutes or so.
Yes, I do apologize. We can't move 5.2 up, so. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Then we will recess until Mr. Ratovich arrives, approximately 7 p.m. Thank you. And call the meeting back to order. Mr. Ratovich is on his way, so we'll go ahead and get started, and he should be able to catch up. I appreciate everyone staying. I understand some couldn't, and I understand that. So we will go on to the ELA adoption and accelerated reader update. Dr. Schillingberg.
Oh, now the green light. President Reese, members of the board, we're here to share with you an update on our ELA adoption. And so I just want to kind of go over a little bit about the process this it is, so you see who all's involved. There's a lot of people involved with this, a lot of people. As the associate superintendent, my responsibility really is to facilitate the process before we get the books and the materials. So I put together the committee. The teachers in that committee actually choose the publisher. I work with the publishers. I work to set up the budget for the cost with the materials and the PD, and then we do the ordering and prepare for growth. And we have a lot of growth here, so that's something that's I have to keep in mind when doing budgeting. Then once we have the materials, that goes to the warehouse. They oversee the shipments, the barcoding, and then delivery to the schools. Once it's delivered to the schools, then it goes to our directors and coaches who oversee the PD. The directors oversee the principals who ensure the fidelity of the use of the materials, and it's part of their evaluation. And they work with the principals work with the directors with the data, and our director of research and assessment to monitor growth. Typically, a presentation like this is done in year 3, because after year 1, it's just the beginning of the year, you're just learning the materials. But you guys wanted an update, so we're giving it to you, but we kind of see this as a baseline because, again, there's so many things we're learning from this. Teachers, especially elementary teachers, because it's a lot for them to learn a whole new curriculum on top of doing the other content areas. And we feel that probably next year we'll see even better results. We're pretty happy. We've got some pretty good results now, but we think they'll be even better. We again have a lot of people here to share with you. We also have Lisa Ballard, who's not only a community member, but she's the HMH rep, and just wave. So if there's any questions that we can't answer, she'll be here to answer them for us, so we appreciate her coming. And I'm gonna have people introduce themselves as they come up, but we're gonna start with our elementary, and Carolyn Flora, our elementary coach for ELA.
Good evening. Thank you for letting us join you tonight and share a little bit about our HMH program and how we're getting started. First of all, I put together a slide here of some of the Journeys resources that we have come to feel is a good place to get started. So when our teachers received their materials, it was an abundance. And last year, we had the opportunity, we being myself and the other site-based literacy coaches, to go through the materials. And here are a few items that we feel are really valuable, and they really enhance instruction, and they're user-friendly. So first, we have here our anchor text with essential questions. That is just the Basil Reader that contains all of the stories. At the bottom here, you see the vocabulary cards. The teachers all have these vocabulary cards for all of the lessons and the retail cards. Those are available in grades K through 3. They can be used whole group. They can be used as centers. Here we have an example of something that we're really focusing on this year, and we're very excited. We have our extended trade book lessons within HMH after units 2, 4, and 6. There's an extended trade book lesson. It comes with a 2-week lesson plan, and we're actually lucky that we purchased with our adoption class set of these books for each teacher. So when they do these, it's not scrambling. They're all right at their fingertips. Here is an example of some focus walls, actually from our schools. They are amazing. Our teachers really were able to dive in and get them up and ready before school even started last year. The focus wall is a really important component of the program because it is a useful tool for not only the teacher but the students. As the students come in on a weekly basis, they know what story they're going to be reading, they know what new words they're going to be learning. It's usually something in the classrooms that they're able to manipulate. For example, the vocabulary words might go up there as they're being taught and they're physically handling them. So it's a great resource. I am going to ask Melanie Schneider, our literacy coach from Centennial, to come up, and she's going to talk a little bit about support at the school sites.
President Reese and members of the board, this is an example of one of my coaching schedules that I have. You'll notice that we do our very best to split the time 50-50, so I spend much of my time doing interventions and the other half of the time doing coaching. So that could be a coaching cycle. It could be working one-on-one with a teacher who's struggling in ELA. It could be doing something that is called in and out coaching, where we go in periodically and we do PD for teachers. It's based on what their need is. We call them out into the hallway. We go over what we saw that was going really well. We go over some suggestions to improve instruction. So that's part of the coaching time as well. I do have a planning time as well up there, so I can plan for my intervention groups. We're currently learning how to use an intervention curriculum that's called the 95% group. So much of my planning time is learning how to prepare those lessons and present them so that the students understand those. Much of my intervention time is a tier 3. So those students are receiving tier 1 instruction, which is their core instruction. And then they receive tier 2 instruction, which is their RTI, or we call it walk to read time. And then I pull them in addition for a tier 3 time. So they're getting lots and lots of interventions. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Melanie. You will see on the next slide here's an example of our second grade comprehensive ELA pacing guide. Before the school year started, actually before the last school year ended, I revamped the ones that I had created at the beginning of last year. I sent out a survey to all the grade levels, all the teachers at all the sites, and asked them what they thought of the pacing, what changes they would like made, any suggestions they might have, and based on their feedback, I revamped these. I tried to make them more user-friendly, so you'll see they include all the information for a unit. There are 6 units, so what you're looking at right now is part of Unit 1. Each unit has a theme. We really love the essential questions. The essential questions is what really guides your instruction. Then we have the standards, the skills and strategies that they're using while they're teaching. At the bottom, you see the unit breakdown with some dates. That is a suggested pacing. Anybody who knows the classroom, every classroom is a little bit different. And in order to accommodate for that, there are some review weeks as well as some time for those literature studies to be fit in. So that is something that every teacher has in their hands.
And can I interrupt and give you a compliment? A lot of times, these guides are made and they are in concrete, but the fact that you're talking with teachers and listening and taking their feedback, I think is a great thing for Higley. It follows our strategic plan and all that stuff, so
Well, thank you.
spot on.
And that was important to me. I know in this position, it's really important for me to get feedback because I am here for the teachers, and if I don't hear what they want, I can't be productive, so thank you. We are going to go on now to the assessments that we have within HMH. This year, we have received a lot of additional professional development. The coaches, the site-based coaches and myself have actually had somebody from HMH coming in and doing very specific trainings, and we this year decided that one of our main focuses were going to be these assessments because they have a lot to offer, and we wanted to make sure that we were getting all of our schools on the same page, and we've been very successful with that so far. So I'd like to ask Jacqueline Roth and Joanna Claire to come up. They are teachers from HTA, and they're going to share a little bit about the experience in the classroom using these assessments.
Good evening, President Reese and members of the board. As you can see on the slide here, we use standards-based assessment. I actually teach first grade, sorry, at HTA.
I teach second.
We use our standards-based weekly assessments for the students, and this is just a little picture here of a report that is available to us after all of the students have taken the test and that's been scored. So we can dive in and we can see how the students are performing on each individual standard, where we need to go back and review, or where the performance is has been enhanced by the instruction.
And can I just ask, so I read that there's paper and then there's online, obviously. Sounds like you're doing them online. Are most of them doing them online? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Last year, we started when it was brand new, we started the first couple weeks just paper so they understood how to take it, and then we got them used to the computers, logging in, just practice test, and then now they're on it. They can log in themselves, they know exactly where to go, and then we go.
How long in each of your grades does a quiz take, would you say, for a normal kid?
Anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. It depends on how long the story is as well.
These standards-based assessments in first grade are typically 8 questions long. Some of them have 1 or 2 extended response questions in them. First graders at this time of the year, my first graders in my class are taking about 30 minutes to finish one of these standards-based assessments.
And in second grade right now, we modified ours because we do a grammar test with HMH as well. But we just do a 6-question test because we take those last 4 grammar questions off because we're already giving a test. So ours are 6 questions. Let's go next. And this just shows what kind of questions there were, the standards that that question was about, whether they got it correct or not. And then you can actually click on the question and it will show what the question was. So if you need to review it and go over it with them, you can individually. What's good about the slide before is you can see whether it was a whole class that did well on it or didn't do well. So you can do whole small group, if it's small group, whole class, you can go over it that with each standard.
I'm sorry, there's so many teachable moments in here. I just want to, just for the good of us and people who standardize testing, this is a great slide because you have a standard and you have one question on a standard. This is not a criticism of you, but if a kid happens to miss one question and you're looking at like a chart, if it's AZ merit and it's just one question and it's maybe a poorly worded questions, it really can skew whether or not kids actually knew. But you guys are giving weekly, so you have much, much better data. But when you have a one-shot standardized end-of-year test and maybe there's one poorly worded question, it can really skew some data. So anyway.
You got it?
Thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of things. So as far as taking the assessments online, like I said, we've had the HMH consultant coming in, and one of our goals this year was to really get everybody on board using the online assessments. And the reason for that, the obvious, our society is technology savvy, but also when you do them online, you readily have these reports at your fingertips. And that is the crucial part that you need in order to plan further instruction. They're right there for you. To answer Mr. Glover's sort of question regarding, I totally agree with the one question. The really nice part about this is as teachers become more and more comfortable with using the program, as the ladies told you, they can be modified. So the nice part is, so you notice that maybe 2/3 of your class missed one question, but there was only one question on that standard. You can go back in and make a three-point assessment just on that standard and have them redo that to see maybe after you've done a little reteaching. So there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, and I also will add that AZ Merit, in case you didn't know, the teachers are not allowed to look at the questions. We sign a document, we all sign a document that we're not even going to look at the questions. So this, if I had my druthers, this is a much better measure and more consistent measure of what kids are doing and how they are achieving than one standardized test.
And I have to brag a little bit about our teachers because, like I said, we came in this year and we rolled out a plan. We wanted to be very systematic about asking teachers to do this because it's a lot, especially you can see first grade. I mean, that is a lot to ask of these guys. And I will say we rolled out a plan where we gave tentative dates and then more firm dates as to when we were hoping everybody would be able to log on, access tests, and so on and so forth. And we still have more time to go. Not everybody's at that point yet, but we have some overachievers who are already there, which is great because it allows us to say, look, it can happen. You can do it. Your kids can do it. On this slide, you will see just a collection of the different assessments, the summative assessments that are available. We have within HMH benchmark and unit tests. In addition, we do our Galileo assessments, but there are tests that are right here within the program.
Well, I was curious, with ATI then, or how often are they, because there's formative and summative, I mean, and I don't know how you guys are using ATI, but they're not weekly testing on this and then having a multitude of ATI?
No. So last year, we were getting our feet wet, and we decided that we were going to try the benchmark assessments that went with HMH. And we tried them out, and we didn't feel that they were quite as effective as the Galileo assessments were. So this year we stepped back and we said, okay, what do we want these assessments to be used for? We want them to be used to guide instruction. So we said, for that purpose, we think that the standards-based weekly assessments that we just discussed, we'd get the most bang for our buck. And so we decided, let's start off by asking teachers to do these standard-based weekly assessments, which are short, 6 to 8 questions, at least 2 times a month, so 2 weeks out of the month. Then we have our benchmark assessments through Galileo, which are just given quarterly. So it's sort of nice because you can see the progression and watch how they grow with the standards.
Can I just ask a quick question? Don't mean to interrupt. So for elementary, every elementary teacher doing this, some doing it, most doing it, where are we on the assessments?
Okay. We just had our second training with the HMH consultant, and as district coaches, we all sat down at a table, and one wonderful resource that we have is that we are able to pull usage reports, and we're able to pull the data for each site to see how many teachers are using them, how many assessments are being built, how many teachers are modifying. And I can't give you an exact number, but I can say that from last year when we were just getting our feet wet and everybody, they did a wonderful job, but it was tough. To this year, just since we implemented, this is what we'd like you to do, we have seen tremendous growth. I'd say right now we're probably at least, and this is a guesstimate, 65%, 70% that are actually utilizing these assessments online. That doesn't mean they're not using them. It just means that they might still be doing pencil and paper. But the growth from the first time we met with the consultant and reviewed the data to this time a couple weeks ago, the growth was amazing. I was so proud of our teachers. It was so nice to see that they had all just jumped in. And
So understanding that was just a few weeks ago, do we have a plan in place that we can go talk to the teachers who may not be using it to find out, have you attempted? Why aren't you using it? Not to say, hey, you need to be doing this, but is there a barrier there, and what is that barrier, and how can we help you? Is it that they don't understand them yet? Because we are just barely in this, well, I guess the school year's cruising along, but we're in our second year, so we're still using it, and especially for our elementary, they had a math adoption too, so.
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question. So first of all, I want to explain too that with this process, we are trying to scaffold. We're trying not to inundate our teachers with too many things at one time, just like we do with our students. So, but with that being said, yes, that is the great part about these professional development opportunities we've had, and just having the site-based coaches as well. So we sat down, we looked at exactly what you said. We took our little list, just like we take a list of our students who needs intervention, and we decided how we were going to go back and how we were going to start that process of getting into those teachers. And what we noticed, which was a helpful thing, is that at sites, you might have 2 teachers in a grade level who were already utilizing it, and maybe 1 or 2 that weren't, or maybe it was 1 whole grade level. So we said, well, first of all, we need to get our superstars who are really utilizing it and doing it well to help us with this. And then the coaches sort of made their own game plans as to, like, I know, for example, Melanie, who just spoke, she went in today and did a presentation for a particular grade level who she thought could use some assistance, sat down with them, showed them how to modify, how to log in, how to assign them. And so now, like I said, we have our intervention plan, and we're getting in there. And I'd say by the next time we meet, which is, I believe, in April, we're going to see even more growth. Like, we're going to be up there.
Because sometimes somebody's not using something because we're missing something, and they see it, and there's a flaw or an issue or a concern that they've come across, and it doesn't meet their needs.
Right.
And I want to know, and that's perfect, and I'm not saying obviously at the moment, and I think that's great, but as a board member, what can we do to help support that?
Right.
Is there an issue, and I'm not saying anything about the curriculum or HMH, but is there something missing for that particular teacher or their grade level that it doesn't work, and that we need to look at doing something different, how we can help support them? I want to see how we can utilize the tools that we have to the best of the ability and make them successful. But are we missing something?
And I think that there are a few things that we've discussed. I know that starting off technology, we had some issues with technology, and a lot of those things, a majority of them have all been worked out. So now we're cruising along with the technology piece. It's now getting the confidence of the teachers, getting that built up a little bit, knowing that if they go to use this, it's going to actually work. The other thing I know, one of the concerns is that all teachers want to make sure that we have enough technology available. If we're asking them to do these assessments, we need to make sure that laptop carts are available and that they're able to get their students on. And I think that probably is our biggest obstacle at this point. Our teachers, our administration, they've done a wonderful job trying to be resourceful and figure out how to divide those resources up amongst their teachers, but that's always a concern. So I think that's one. And then just the big one, I think, like I just said, is just keep educating them, keep showing them how to do it. The more it becomes second nature, the more they're going to utilize the resources.
Well, and that's where my other concern comes in is, yes, we're only in our second year and we're still learning and getting our feet wet, but the longer somebody doesn't use these resources and the tools, the harder it will be to transition to these resources and these tools. So I'm not concerned about it now, as long as we're talking and meeting and understanding what those barriers are whether it be education, whether it be they tried to use them previously and it wasn't very user-friendly, but now we have more training and education on it. My concern is you get into year 3, year 4, and you have a teacher who's not utilized these tools at all, trying at that point to direct them in that area.
Right, right.
As a reason, if I could just interject here, I think that's the advantage we have of having full-time literacy coaches in our elementaries, because they have that direct connection to the staff, the support, so they can see who needs support, who needs help, who is doing what with, our different resources. And we also are looking at the data. So if we see teachers where the data is showing us that students aren't making success, then we're going to target those teachers for support.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to try to let you off the hook on that one too. I mean, the coaches, the district coach and the coaches on campus, they don't necessarily have the authority, but the relationship with the principal will allow for those things to start to happen. But one thing I'm thinking, I don't know how the elementaries use the carts, if they're shared among all grade levels, but sounds like it might be helpful if there was a cart at every grade level. We have a technology plan.
There is. There's a cart at each grade level, and each grade level shares a cart.
Okay, that's good.
The goal, we started here, was that they would have pods, so they could share a cart, so that each one had a pod, and that's mostly how they use them, is pods in their back of the rooms for small group instruction.
Okay. And now, I'd like to introduce Maggie Borsey. She is our secondary ELA instructional coach.
And as Maggie's walking up, I should have read my notes, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention, we have over 60 slides, which would take forever. So I did ask them to not cover every slide word for word. That's background information for you, but so we aren't here forever. You could have questions that they won't cover every slide.
Hi, good evening. I'm Maggie Borsey, the secondary ELA coach. Thank you so much for listening to my spiel for secondary. I can be smart. Okay, we'll just use the arrow. I apologize. Can you tell I'm a little nervous? Okay. So this first slide that I'd like to show you just basically has the resources that HMH Collections has to offer. Though it's HMH Collections is different from the journeys that the elementary teachers use. So some resources include the close readers that include various fiction and nonfiction pieces with text-dependent questions, discussion questions, and analyses that coincide with the unit. There are interactive activities for writing, pre-made grammar PowerPoints, unit assessments. My favorite is the news articles. It's called FYI, that go with the theme of the collections, and it's at that particular grade level. So for example, one of the collections themes for 6th grade is fears and phobias, and so they can go on and read articles written by Newsweek writers about fears and phobias. And then the ability to take notes, if they're opting to use the interactive, the online portion of HMH, they can take notes on their readings. This next slide is the secondary curriculum pacing guide. It's broken down again by collections, and that is what they teach per quarter. If you'll notice, and circled in red are the standards that the teachers cover that quarter with those particular collections. Anchor texts are included that the teachers can choose from, additional readings, close readers, and then HMH approved novel studies. So the teachers do have their pick. This also goes with their writing, same idea. They have the standards that they will cover, and then the style of writing, whether it's expository or argument, and then the various academic vocabulary that will be covered within that collections, and then how the other standards will be taught. So like with speaking and listening, what types of speeches or types of presentations the kids will present to their peers. The assessments at the secondary level are quite similar. They can go online and take either a common formative assessment or a summative. If you'll notice in the picture, it looks very much like AZ Merit, which is very beneficial for our students. So there are going to be questions where they have to drag and drop maybe highlight a part A, part B for a text-dependent question. So it looks like AZ Merit, so there are no surprises to the kids when they take the test in April.
I ask, so
Yes, sir.
the benchmarks are summative, so are those also just quarterly?
Say that one more time.
The benchmarks, how often did they take
They
an
took,
ATI?
they took a benchmark assessment halfway through, like end of first quarter, and it covered 5 power standards, but that was taken on Galileo.
That's what I was asking, so
Mhm,
Galileo
yeah, it was a
is
Galileo
quarterly?
benchmark, yes, and so will their semester assessment.
If you guys can blow that slide up a little bit, this is also another teachable moment. These are the things that teachers have to wrestle with, and I'm not picking, this is just, I think it's good for us to understand when we get these results back from teachers. So this passage, Race's Whiskers, it starts out, it's 6 paragraphs, and the first one is about Abe Lincoln and looming Civil War, and the Union's going to break apart. And then there's a joke about old Abe, and one of these kids calls him Old Ape, and it's humorous and funny. And so then if you look at part A, the questions, it says which best describes the tone and the author of those passages. Well, if you're a kid and you're talking about the Civil War as looming, that could be exciting and suspenseful or foreboding and serious, but then the way the kids are talking to each other, it's lively and humorous, or witty is also a synonym for humorous. And so these are the types of questions that these guys have to sometimes wrestle with, and we get graded on. If they're not, you could make an argument for 3 of 4 of those being correct. And then, if you look at part A, part B, if you get part A wrong, part B asks you to use your answer for part A. So you would miss 2 if you misinterpreted. And I'm not bagging on HMH or sample questions, but I'm just saying these are the realities of what our teachers, they're giving a test that they don't, for AZ Merit, that they've not seen or written, and sometimes these things happen. So they're probably all good questions maybe, but.
And the important thing to note is they are standards-based. So, I mean, you're going to see these 2 questions, but there are going to be multiple questions that address the standard. And so the important thing to know is the teachers are teaching, they're using the standards to drive the instruction, and what's great about HMH is all the standards are there for them. So another example, and this is a PLC made common formative, this was from Higley High School's sophomore PLC, is they use the material from HMH, and they, again, use that standard to drive the instruction, and then they use the standard to assess the student using the HMH material. And in this case, these are short answer questions. Some rely on them going back to the text and pulling out evidence. Cooley Middle School is very much into using what's called HMH 1 assessment, and it's a platform where they can go in and there are wonderful ready-made tests that they can just pull from, or they can create their own assessments through this site. So this is just an example of one of the quiz questions that was created by a teacher, 7th grade. And again, it looks very AZ Merit-esque. What's also nice too is you can create online on the platform essay prompt, and just like on AZ Merit, they're given this little box, and they have to type their essay in that box. So it gives the kids practice on, not all the time is the tab bar gonna work, so they're gonna have to space a few times. They're getting the practice on typing online, and then it's still following the writing standards, and then again, it can be a teacher-created prompt or a prompt from HMH. Professional development is provided for the teachers. I had an HMH trainer visit the secondary teachers at our first PD in August, and it was a refresher on HMH, and then I had the trainer speak heavily on creating assessments. And then another PD session in September focused on the text, but using small group instruction to drive the instruction with the standards, and then the teachers had their texts with them. And then finally, I myself am their support system. I go in and I help the teachers plan curriculum using the HMH program. I'm familiar with it last year at my previous school on the teacher side, so I can bring in my expertise in that area. And then how to make standards assessments. I do like a quick step 1, step 2, step 3. I shoot it out. I also play around with the site myself and send out, hey, teachers, check this out if you haven't. This is a really cool tool that you can use. And the teachers, they're they're enjoying it, they're using it, their confidence level has increased. I feel just this from what I've only known them since July, but since July I know their confidence level has increased as well using the program. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions in reference to secondary. One is I'm really struggling with the technology piece in reference to this. A lot of, in reference to your presentation, revolves around technology. One of our high schools has bring your own technology to school, things like that. We do have a shortage of technology in our schools. I'm hearing that we're bringing the elementary technology equipment up to the high schools at certain time for testing. So how is there equity in this district in reference to the use of all these wonderful things I'm seeing in front of me with the technology component to complement this instruction? Kind of see there, somebody could answer that question for me, because we've got this wonderful program, but how is this technology complementing this when we don't have the technology?
President Reese, members of the board, technology is something that we're struggling with across the district, and unfortunately, it's a matter of funds. We have ordered 1,000 new computers for the high schools this year, and we do have technology at all of our schools, but we continue to need more technology. That's one of the reasons why we would like to go out to the voters this summer and ask for another override so we can buy technology for the district. But as far as technology goes for our schools, right now we're about a 1 to 3 technology computer-based for all the students within the district. And that doesn't include our labs. That just includes our laptops that teachers can check out and utilize throughout the district. But you know, you're correct. We do need more technology in this district, and we're working hard to make sure that we increase our technology every single year.
Because technology is an important component to this. Correct.
I would agree, technology is an important component to it, but it's also actual teaching and working with the students in classrooms in small group basis. And so we do have the ability for teachers to have technology in their classroom at least every other day. And so there's grade levels that are sharing technologies, and we have labs. And so teachers that really want to utilize technology, they can work with their administrator and their team grade levels to make sure that we have those appropriate opportunities for the students in the classes.
And I just add that the technology that we will be adding is going to enable every ELA and math teacher to have a cart.
President Reese, I have a quick question. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your full name. Maggie, what is your day like as secondary?
What do I do on a daily basis?
I like seeing our elementary literacy coach, but how do you manage what you're doing with all of our teachers?
My Google Calendar, basically.
Well, I just,
no, honestly,
I mean, I'm guessing you have 4 schools.
No, I also go to the elementary schools.
So you,
because 6th grade uses the collections.
So you do 6
So I go to all
12.
the schools. Yes, ma'am. So, no, again, Google Calendar. I go and I visit all of the teachers. I observe. I ask if I can, can I work with a group? Can I sit next to the turkey kid and help them out? And so I go in and I've been able to teach. It's been wonderful. I've gotten my teaching fix. And then I watch the strategies, and then I shoot out a mass emails like with the 6th grade teachers, and I call them my teacher shout outs. And I call out the teacher and say, Mrs. Braxma over at Bridges Elementary did this really cool foldable with this particular story, and I send pictures out. I do the same thing with the middle school teachers and the high school teachers too.
And so at our high school, we do have some intervention coach, or we call them, not intervention, we call them.
She's an interventionist.
Interventions, like Mrs.
Yes,
Nevins at Higley and English, right? And so they're kind of under you to get to the teacher. I mean, you're one person.
Pretty well together. We're like Carolyn and her coaches. We sit together, and she looks at data. So she looked at the AZ Merit data. She looks at the Common Formative Assessment data and says, okay, so these group of kids from this particular teacher, they didn't score too well on this particular standard. And so she pulls them out. She pulls them into her classroom, works with them, sends them back in. So it's like a pull out, push in type system. And then she also goes into the classrooms and is that second teacher, that co-teacher, so to speak. And then because I'm stretched around the the district, I do the same thing. I go in and I help where I can. I co-teach when possible.
And I
ask
have
if can
noticed that
teach.
some of our ELA classes in our high schools have 2 teachers.
That is a
is
co-taught
that a
setting.
strategic, like, purposeful
Yes,
because of the fact that,
There are a handful of kids on IEPs in that particular class, so it helps to have, and in most of those classes, if they're a class of maybe 30, 32, maybe a good 10
Okay.
are on IEPs.
Okay.
So they go in as a co-teaching setting. I mean, the co-teacher has a desk, they have a system, and they
Right.
just kind of do a parallel teaching, which is
Okay.
lovely.
well, thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate it.
Quick question for you, and I'm sorry, I'm going to
No.
totally put you on the spot.
That's
I
fine.
just want your honest answer here. We've noticed a lack of availability to professional development for middle and high school. So you mentioned they had a PD day in August and a PD day in September. I don't think they get another PD day until
Middle school will have one November 28th.
middle school and then
Yes.
high school.
The
High school, I think, has 4 or 6.
they have
They have 4
4.
for the year. So let us know what your thoughts on that as you're trying to provide them coaching and assistance. I know, I told you I'm totally
I'm
putting you on the
new.
spot here.
I said I would play that card. I'm new.
No.
We also don't want to keep the teachers away from their principals either. Their principals also have their agenda that they want to work with their teachers. So I
So-
respect the principals and what they want to do with their teachers.
As you're working with high school, I mean, again, we're in our second year, it's an adoption for them as well. Obviously, in middle and high school, they're subject teachers primarily. So what barriers do you see or difficulties do you see having to, if there's something you're noticing they need assistance with, not having access to the teachers? Elementary has early release every Wednesday, so they have a little more access to their teachers than you would for middle and high school. And no answer is the wrong answer, so, I mean, we want to make sure we're supporting you, we want to make
No,
sure we're
thank you.
supporting our teachers,
I
so-
attend PLCs. I attend almost all of the high school PLCs. And when I have something I would like to share, I kind of butt in, and they know I'm going to come, which is nice. So just like today, I was at Williamsfield, and they were looking at how to pair texts with the Martin Luther King speech and a Malcolm X speech. And I said, mind if I interject? I have an idea for you. So by me attending PLCs, I'm at the department meetings all the time. I was just at Cooley today at a department meeting talking about standard-based objective writing. So I get in there. So it might not be all of the middle school teachers together, all the high schools together, everyone together. I at least get small group instruction, so to speak, with those teachers.
President Reese? I would also like to say that we acknowledge that we need more professional development time for our middle schools and high schools. With the changes in state regulations last year, that includes time included for passing and for lunch times. We will be able to meet our minutes required for high school and middle school credits for students, and so we'll be able to bring our next calendar to the board to include more professional development time for our middle schools and high schools.
Okay. No, and to hear that you're able to meet with them in their department meetings and help support them, that's important. I know for me, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but to ensure that these teachers do have the support through this adoption and getting used to the new curriculum. So
Oh, absolutely.
it's good to hear that there is time that you are meeting with them. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just add that, we were able to put in full-time literacy coaches this year in the elementary schools and add support for each high school. Higley chose to do ELA, Williamsville chose math. Our goal is to give them one each, so we're still working toward that as finances make it possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the accelerated reader and where we are in the district at our schools with accelerated reader. And we're going to start with Karen Bacon from HTA.
Good evening, President Reese, members of the board. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Accelerated Reader is and what it does for our students. So it offers an opportunity for independent practice. Students are assessed with a STAR assessment, which is a general reading screener that gives teachers good information about what the instructional level for our independent level, and then they give you a zone of proximal development. That zone is quite a long, wide range, and it allows them to place a student appropriately within text that they're able to access, for the most part, independently. It's student-driven. They're motivated by students that are motivated by a token economy or a token society. I use the analogy of like an Apple Watch. My husband and I have this little competition, although he's not competing with me because I don't really care, but he likes to close his rings. So if a student is motivated by earning points or closing rings or playing video games, that kind of thing, this would highly motivate them to do that because they do earn points and they work toward goals. And there are celebrations at the schools that take part in using Accelerated Reader. It does develop reading for recall. They're able to retell the stories that they read. There are 140,000 quizzes available through the Accelerated Reader program. So depending on the size of the school library, many of those are available to students, but also those are available in the public libraries too for students to check out with their families. It does support literacy at home. Parents are familiar with the program. They know how to implement it with their kids. They understand. You read a book, you take a quiz, you get a point or many points. It's motivational factor for some, but not all. There are other things that motivate some students. It has been a part of the Higley culture. There are 3 schools using it right now. It's a familiar product for us. Our teachers do understand it as well as our parents. And it provides that data that I was talking about for the zone of proximal development. And it does have accountability for students. They really can't pass a test unless they've read the book or at least understand the basic concepts of the book. They are DOK 1 questions, level 1 questions. At my school, we call them kind of write their questions. You could open up a book and point to the answer. They don't require students to really connect to the text, make inferences, that sort of thing. But they do measure whether the student has read the book. Any questions about that? Okay. I'd like to introduce Rachel Bradley from Centennial. She's up next.
Good evening. So I'm going to be talking about what AR is not, what it doesn't do for our students. So as Karen mentioned, it is a program that allows students to show their comprehension of a book that they've read. It does not help correct deficiencies that they may have. So an example of that is with our adopted math curriculum. Students have the ability to participate in Redbird, and it allows them an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and progress in their skills. So AR is not a program that is similar in that aspect. Not all students are engaged. They're not motivated by the AR. They don't see the purpose for it. But again, as Karen had mentioned, it is engaging, or it does motivate some students. It's just not all students. We are limited to the books that are currently within our individual school library. So while there is such a robust library quiz through AR, we're limited to what we have on our sites. And because students are restricted in range, so typically, and again, there's some flexibility here, but typically kids are given an AR level, right? So they can read like pink, white, blue, and those are the books they get to check out. And some schools, when we had our AR, the kids had to stay within those ranges. They couldn't read a black dot, even if they really, really wanted to, and that book interested them so much. If they really wanted that Harry Potter book and it wasn't in their range, we're like, you can't check it out. But some schools are a little bit more flexible with that. So just, it kind of depends on the person implementing that program.
But, sorry, Renaissance will tell you that is a bad practice. So, I mean, I would hope that our schools didn't nail kids into those colors. I mean, you want them for maximum growth to be in those, but it is a bad practice to say to a child, this is all you can read, and when they want to stretch and grow, we shouldn't. That's not.
Right,
I know that people do that, and that's why the program.
Yeah.
That's why people hate the program, but it's a misuse of the program.
Yeah. It is not free. There is a substantial cost associated with this program. It does require teacher support to help kids go along and ensuring that they have the right books so that they're reading at a independent level and not struggling to read. Just making sure that they're provided with the right type of text. The teacher's checking in to do the reports as well. It is designed to, as Karen mentioned, that basic recall, so it doesn't really allow the students to dig in deep. It doesn't allow them to critically analyze the text, compare, contrast, inference, those type of things. Because it is only covering the basic comprehension of a story, it does not provide diagnostic data to really give us a full understanding of everything that encompasses the everything that reading encompasses, because it's not just about comprehension. Reading isn't just about comprehension. And then it also promotes quantity over quality. So what we mean by that is for those students that are motivated to earn their AR goal or that token economy, sometimes they don't care necessarily about the book that they're reading, they just want the points. And so it takes away that intrinsic motivation or that passion for reading because they just want to get that goal. And they're not and this isn't like a blanket statement to all kids. This is just an example that it could take away that motivating factor, that, I don't know, that passion to read because they just want to read what they want to read. And that book may not be in their AR goal, or maybe it's only worth 1 point, so why are they going to waste their time, or those type of things.
Can I just add? So, I mean, so we have HMH. HMH is the program that teaches them to read and addresses deficiencies. This is a supplemental program, and it's for independent reading and getting kids to love reading. So, I mean, we should not expect it to do the hows and the whys. They just want to know if a child has read a book independently. So it does. I mean, by definition, then they will tell you that it does the who, the what, the where, and the when. But the how and the why is a whole different ballgame. They have literacy quizzes for some things for that, but it's just a supplemental program, and we shouldn't really. We don't want to muddle them together. You've got HMH, which does a certain thing, and then I'm a fan of AR. Everybody's not. I get that. But it is just independent reading and to help develop a love of reading. And it does offer choice. With HMH, you're in the leveled readers that they pick, but here we want kids to self-select and be better readers. So I'm not pushing back on you. These are all fair criticisms. But anyway, HMH does the reading intervention. Don't expect AR to do that. It's not what it does.
Right.
Mr. Glover, I'd just like to, on this question in reference to, this is a supplemental program, and what the issue nowadays in school is the lack of independent reading, and our children don't sit and read independently, and this type of program encourages that type of program. It encourages the children to read, and I think that's very important.
And I'll agree and disagree at the same time. Like Ms. Bradley said, if it's implemented appropriately, yes. I remember my kids doing AR, and it was about the points. They didn't care about the book. I don't know how many Captain Underpants books my kids read, but they were good points. I know that. Yeah. I know Captain Underpants is several points. And so it wasn't, if it's implemented appropriately, if it's, I'm only going to look at the books and their points, and I'm going to determine what I'm going to read, we kind of lose the point of it on read what you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about what points it is, because you're skipping over books you may love, but like you said, it's 1 point, it's not worth it, or the quarter's almost over and I need this many points, and so I'm going to have to do this. And again, from my experience with the kids, it's not reading the book, it's skimming. It's, can I get enough information to get enough points out of that AR test? Mm-hmm. So I agree. I think it can be that if it is implemented correctly, if it is supported correctly, and it can help entice to read more and hopefully not stifle their reading, but for them to read because they love to read, not because how many points they're going to get.
Sure, and I think the concern, President Reese, though, is without it now, how much are kids reading, and how do we know that they're reading? We talked, the first part of this whole presentation was all about accountability, and I don't know if they're reading more or less, or if they're checking out. I mean, our book checkout's up, but the folks that I mean, book checkouts probably are even, but the amount of independent books that have actually been read, we just don't know. But there is a huge component, and we did see when we were moving to HMH, we did look at some numbers to see if the program was being used with fidelity, and as Renaissance would say that it's being used, and I would probably agree that it was not being used properly. It was a hammer, and kids were hating it, and I'm not a huge fan of these giant celebrations where a kid doesn't get to come to a. They should be reasonable, and I think there should be some conferencing. But we have to talk, though, about supplemental programs, and this is maybe a bigger thing, and I'm not putting you on the spot on this one, but we had a long discussion, and I don't know what got to the principals or didn't, but the board was told that when you have a new adoption, all supplemental materials go away. And some of us thought that you all should have had the opportunity to talk about it on your campuses and decide and make a decision. Did it work for your campus? Did it not work for your campus? Do you still want it? Is it valuable? Should we do it? Do we need to retrain everybody? And it was because HMH happened and supplementals were included that it just went away. And unfortunately, some schools didn't have it for a while, and now it is back. And the problem, I think this is just Higley growing, our board policy, the policy says that a supplemental program, if it is being brought back for any adoption after 2016-17, has to be brought before the board. And that did not happen, and schools are now using AR. And I'm not going to take it away from you guys because I like it, but we have to, as a district, if we have policies, we have to follow them. And if we don't like them, then we should change them. So I'm glad you guys have had discussions about this supplemental, but that's unbeknownst to us, and it really doesn't follow our policy. So we should probably start to talk about, do schools like it? What grades would use it? And should the district pay for it, or should we put it on the schools? How valuable it is? But this is a supplemental program, and it probably deserves a little bit more discussion.
I would add that I think, because Linda told me that and I haven't looked at our policy recently, but that the policy is that the board only approves the curriculum. They don't approve the supplemental programs. Mike, do you know that policy? Linda's not here, but yeah, and it says that the board approves supplementals?
We had a big thing about it, and we just approved that. So yeah, it's IJJ, and there's a paragraph about supplemental materials, and it talks about, because we did after 2016, we now have curriculum. We have ELA and we have math. So any new supplements in those areas have to come before the board. But like science, we haven't adopted in a long time. Social studies, those can still be.
See, because that's what we created, that list that we have in the department.
And I think the other part of that, and I think it's consistency. Again, the conversation is somewhat about AR, and it's somewhat about supplementals in general, and being used with fidelity, and how is it being used. I know, again, kind of go back a little ways, because my kids are a little bit older and haven't dealt with AR for a while. I know when they were in elementary and AR, it was part of their grade. That if you met your goal, then you could get a 3. If you didn't meet your AR goal, you weren't getting a 3 because you weren't where you needed to be. So I think that part of the problem with supplementals is how they're being used, how are each school using them. Some schools using them for a grade, some schools not using them for a grade, some teachers using them calculated in their grade. And so when you have such a disparity in how an item is used, then that creates an issue and it creates a consistency. And then for all the assessing and seeing where our kids are at, then you're not even on the same playing field. So it's hard to figure out independently how are our kids reading, and it just depends on how a school's using it and how it's being reported and recorded. So I think that's part of the other issue with supplementals. I like the AR that from parents can go online and they can see their kids' reading levels. I like that working with the teachers, when you have those accelerated kiddos that now their reading level no longer fits their maturity, then what do? You know, so their reading level's so high, but they're not ready for the content for that reading level. So then what do? And then how do you encourage that for AR and the points and, like you said, the celebrations? And so I think that that's kind of the bigger overall issue. I think that supplementals have a place, and I think they have a value. I think AR has a place, and I think it has a value. But I think it's the consistency factor. And I'm with Mr. Glover. It's not like we need to understand, as we removed AR, now that some are using it again, that goes a different direction. But how is it working? How are you guys using it? If there's 3 schools using AR, what's the value to each school? Are all 3 schools using it the same way? Are all teachers across the grade level using it? Are all teachers in the schools using it? So that way, as a board, we can get a sense of the value of it. And like Mr. Glover said, determining, is that something that district covers? Is it something that maybe a school or a PTO covers? Or I know several PTOs that would purchase AR and Dreambox and the stuff that the school needed. So are all 3 schools represented here that are using it?
I know
Just
that
2 of them.
2 of them are.
So, Madam President, where do we go from here? I guess some of my concerns in reference to, I agree with everything that Mr. Glover is saying this evening. My other question is, where are we going to go from this? And some of the questions that you just raised, I'm interested in those answers too as well. And the people that are here today are not the people that are actually teaching in the schools that can answer those questions for us. And I think we need some questions to be answered in addition to this and where we're going to go with this.
President Reese, members of the board, I completely concur with what Mr. Glover said. I believe we need to have another work study on supplemental materials, and then if AR is something that we need to add, it should be approved by the board. I completely agree with that 100%, and then we would bring that supplemental materials list to the board on an annual basis to be approved. I do believe that is something we need to bring back to the board, and then review the entire set, not just AR, all the supplemental materials we have, to make sure that we're following our policy, and that is something that I take responsibility for, and that we will bring to the board and discuss that at a later date.
Well,
I would just interject there, if I could just interject that Linda had us create a supplemental list that she said was kept in the Ed Services Department, and that she told me that that was approved by our department. It wasn't, the board did not approve supplemental materials. So we want to get that information straight, because that's how we have a list now that we have in our office, because we collected all the supplemental materials that the principals and schools are using. And that is what we're going from what Linda gave us the direction.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so can you tell us how AR is going? I know my understanding, I might have had a surprised look. My understanding was HTA was the only one using AR. So I was a little surprised to find out 3. My understanding was there was only 1, and it was HTA. And so how's it going? I mean, I know that the teachers wanted it. So while we're talking about AR, and let us know, what is it doing? How's it being used? And how it's going with using the combined AR and HMH.
And just to interject, so you know, it's obviously HTA and Bridges and Coronado's use at the primary level.
So I have a couple of teachers here. I don't know if I want to put them on the spot or not, looking at their facial expressions, but you know, it was brought back to my school because it was a community desire. And I heard from tons of parents and tons of teachers that really wanted it. And when Dr. Schillingberg asked us to poll our staff and our community as to what the interest was, overwhelming response. I had 99% of my staff respond favorably to bringing it back. We do use it with
When
Fidelity.
was that? I was unaware
This
there
was-
was a
this
poll
was
done for
last-
community and for.
Last spring. We just kind
Okay.
of we did some fact finding.
Okay.
Just kind of figured
Was
out.
that survey done at your school or all schools across the district?
All schools. Yeah. It was the teaching staff.
We surveyed the teachers to see what their interest was in AR, and that was last spring.
Okay, so we polled the teachers to find out who wanted it.
But me personally, I received daily emails from people in my community that asked us to bring it back. They wanted to hold readathons to fund it. Our PTO was willing to fund it. Whatever resources we could pull together to pay for the subscription, they wanted it back. So I listened as a leader. I listened to my community. I'm kind of indifferent as a principal as to my personal opinion on AR. I was a literacy coach for a long time. I see value in children reading books. I don't think you can argue with practice, no matter what that practice looks like. And so if kids are interested and motivated by doing that, I don't want to stop them from it. In my school, I can speak to my school, our practice is to let them check out multiple books. One of them should be an AR book at their independent reading level, and another one is a book of choice. And we don't lock them into a compartment and say you must and you can only read these things. They are given a lot of choice. And it's highly encouraged in all of my classrooms. It's not part of a grade and it's not mandated. But it is highly encouraged and it's pumped up and it's talked about. So we celebrate. We celebrate just reading in general and literacy.
Ditto. Across the board, Sherry Richards was our principal when we both became APs, so we come from the same school.
Now your school is a new school, and you do not have, I know, all the books that are necessary at that school. So how are you have a successful program like this as compared to what's available at HDA?
Well, as we have book fairs, we try to purchase more and more books. Obviously, we don't have as many as our established schools or schools that have been established for longer have, but that's one of our goals is to do that. So can we fulfill the needs like Karen can at her school? We probably can't, but it was something that, again, our teachers wanted, and we had our first year, and they wanted that. So we went based off that survey.
So what were the surveys at the other schools? So we have two schools here in front of us. So what happened out here in reference to this? Because this has been part of the Higley culture for over 10 years. And I seem it kind of interesting, only two schools when this has been part of our culture for over 10 years.
We can all join in. I would say for my campus, it was very much a mixed bag. I would say that I had 3 or 4 teachers that were pretty passionate about wanting AR. I had 3 or 4 teachers that said, please don't ever do that to me again. And a lot of in between, that was somewhat neutral. I don't hear much from my community in terms of wanting and desiring AR as part of our regular practice.
So like at Gateway, we had a mixed response as well. Majority of them were not for AR because of the adoptions, and we knew that we were going to have a math adoption as well and the impending social studies and science. A lot of the response I had from our teachers is it's just one more thing to monitor and to keep track of, and they love the STAR test. They absolutely love the STAR test. That was they're like, we just get the STAR test. That's all we want. We just don't want to do the AR portion of it. So that was the feedback we received from our staff. So for us, we felt if we weren't going to have the staff buy-in, like you had mentioned, it would be difficult to do it and do it well.
And go ahead. You've been waiting. I was just going to, no, go ahead.
Just for me personally, a few concerns and things that I'm hearing tonight up here in my board is that one of the things that we talked about last year, or when we adopted this HMH, was the fidelity of the program and using it solely so that we could come back with data and know exactly how are we doing with HMH. Now we've added 3 schools doing AR, so is their data going to be a little skewed because now they do have AR and the other schools don't? Like, I'm just wondering, how can we say that HMH is this when we've tweaked it now a little bit after we were told
Yeah.
I'm confused on this part.
I
If
do think
somebody-
that that's something we will have to look at, but interestingly, it's our two highest performing schools have chosen to do AR. Now, they were highest performing last year without AR, but, so I don't think that will have much of an effect on them, but that does come a convoluting factor that we'd have to think
Can I
about.
chime in too?
And
As a
please.
non-AR school, I will
Please.
say that, I think when you're talking about, that data component, I would say be careful in that, and it's not an adopted program, but I think that's assuming an absence of literacy-based programs, which is supposed to be the next slide, that's me.
Okay.
It's assuming absence of literacy-based programs in other campuses, and that's not necessarily
It's
the
not a
case. I mean, there's still
replacement,
things that are
right.
going on other campuses to promote literacy, to promote independent reading. It may not be formalized as AR.
Gotcha.
And like in any school setting, obviously, there's going to be some independent practice that's happening on campuses that's a little bit different. And, Jeff's parents may be better about reading with their kids than my parents. And you're always going to have a little bit of
Absolutely.
data that's going to play out that way. So I
Absolutely.
think there's a lot of factors at play there that may or may not impact that over.
Okay. One other thing I heard, and this is not to chastise anybody or cause any kind of dissension here, but when I hear that there was surveys done and the teachers wanted this, and it was a supplemental that we are supposed to bring forth, it concerns me that there wasn't a conversation with us, just that come to us and say, hey, the teachers really want this, here's the data, this is what the communities are saying. Maybe we made a mistake and said no more to AR, and so why wasn't that back to us sooner? Why are we just hearing about this now, I guess, is a little bit of a concern to me.
Yeah, we did the survey last spring, and I'm sorry, I thought you had it, but because it was mixed, that's why I said, we sent it out and said, if you'd like to do it, because there's a cost associated with it, we don't really have the dollars for that. Well, you have your PTA supported, that's great. If you don't want to do it, we don't want to force it on anyone. So that's where we are. And so the ones that really wanted it are doing it, and their PTOs are supporting it. The ones who were not really into it, are not doing it.
The last conversation we had about AR about a year ago was very intense. So for us not to get that information back to us, knowing that the board had a very intense conversation, I'm really kind of uncomfortable with that in reference to what you just brought up.
Intense, but we were divided. So it would have been great to have that information
Yes.
from our
Yes.
teachers who are living it.
Well, the presentation.
Well, we did want your teachers to have a voice, and we wanted you to have a voice as well. So this is all learning, and I think the discussion with supplementals, it is probably a misunderstanding, and I think we can do better moving forward. But the one thing that struck me as I looked, at some district numbers is, I know there's teachers that use it, know how to use it, and use it well, and there's, but some training. If we're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 campuses do this, it's a worthwhile investment to bring somebody in to train the proper uses so that kids are not told they can't read out, that their goals aren't like everybody's the same as 20 points. You can conference with a kid. It's fairly easy to administer and to look at as a teacher, but you have to look at it. You can't just set their goals and be done. And that's an ongoing training piece. So if we're going to invest that money, it's on you guys right now, but I mean, depends how many would opt in if the district paid. But the other component that I think you need, and I guess there's other ways to do it, but I would not have AR without the STAR test. That really sets the kids in the right place otherwise. And there's a lot of schools that it's too expensive, and STAR is much cheaper because it's just a test you take maybe quarterly or semester. It's cheaper, but without it, I wouldn't waste the money on AR. That's just my 2 cents. And again, schools decide that this is not for them. It's supplemental.
And I do think that's what I've heard from them, the ones that like it, they do like that STAR test.
Now, I'm remembering that conversation, and we were very divided on that. There was also a lot of discussion because of purchasing HMH that they had their own type of reading program. And I know that that was a discussion with the board because there was concerns about AR going away and that they had their own reading program. So if I'm understanding from our principals, and thank you, I know this isn't easy, it's educational for us, but I heard you say that there's the actual literacy piece, and that's HMH, and they're teaching that, and not to confuse that with HR, so that they are learning the instructional piece through HMH. So does HMH not have a leisure reading program, if you will? Because that was our understanding as it was presented when we talked about removing AR, and that HMH has its own reading program. So is there not a reading program component?
Independent reading, and
Right.
there's
An independent
If you're
reading
looking for a
program.
specific, within HMH, there isn't specifically a STAR assessment to go with a choice book. We do have trade books that are part of it in Unit 6 that the teachers can use. We do have the decodables, we have the leveled readers, but if you're looking for a mini assessment for each book of choice, per se, is what Accelerated Reader has. HMH does not have that component.
Okay.
HMH is more of, let's teach the skills, the strategies, the phonemic awareness, those foundational skills, especially at the K-3. That's the goal of our core program. As far as, like I said, the assessment piece, HMH does not offer that, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Been up there a lot. I just wanted to add that I think maybe some of the confusion when Dr. Schillingberg was checking into and asking questions about if there was anything that was similar was possibly the assessing their reading level within the HMH program. You have access to it. It's an older test, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's the TOEFL or it's very old. It's a word recognition test, and it says that it will determine independent reading level. However, it's very time consuming and I think very dated. So that was one resource that was available. And then as well, there's a component called cold reads, and you can use those if teachers are trained to find independent reading levels. So there might be a few resources that could be used to determine their levels, but there's nothing that compares with the actual quiz part.
Okay. Do we want to go on to our next slide?
I think they probably covered.
Whatever you want.
I think you've, like I said, we got a lot of slides here.
Yes.
So now we're going to move on to Dr. Kyriakos to go over the data.
Good evening. My job today is to talk to you about data. I have two pieces of data today to talk to you about. The first part is the survey that went out to all our ELA teachers, and then I have AZ Merit data. And the third part, Jeff is going to talk about what our schools do with data in their schools. So the survey data, we had the survey sent out to 281 ELA teachers. In K-5, 151 teachers, 55 secondary teachers. We got 204 responses back, 73% response rate.
73%, that's a C average. Why is it how we're presenting the survey? Are we making it convenient for the teachers to respond? Because the C average is not good.
Right.
So how are we surveying our teachers?
It was an online survey. It went to their email, and it was open for 2 weeks. And we said we are collecting information about HMH for the board presentation, and we had told them that the board had requested this data, and that's all it said.
do we ever nudge and say we haven't responded because
I
to
did
get
send-
additional, because a 73% is truly not a good reflection of exactly what people are, how they're being, interpreting this. So I'm just kind of, why aren't we kind of nudging, getting more information, incentives, so we get better data in reference to a response like this?
I send out 3 reminders. So every 4 days, I send out a reminder and said, please complete the survey so that we can compile this data for the board.
Is the survey easy to use, or is there something that's not working here?
I didn't get any feedback on that, so I am not certain.
Yeah.
Did you hear anything about the survey?
I mean, is it difficult or time consuming or something? I just kind of, okay, because if I'm getting response back in a survey in reference to a program and it's 73%, it's truly not reflective of what's truly happened.
Right.
Okay.
I have positive response. And I understand what you're saying. I was just thinking in terms of the.
Oh, sorry. We just finished up an election, and I think if 73% of the community had voted, we would have been thrilled. So I think that's just typical in our society in general, unfortunately.
I would say 73% is higher than a lot of survey results we get. So this is, and I agree, I'd love to have 100%, especially the teachers and students, because you have access to them. But the reality is, unless we're forcing them and giving them the time to sit down and do it, you can't force everyone to do these surveys. So this is a much better return rate than I've seen in a lot of surveys we've had.
It was a Likert type scale. It only had 7 questions, and it had 2 open-ended questions. The open-ended questions just asked them what they liked about the curriculum, and the second question was what we could improve. So one of the questions asked, I'm satisfied with the quality of ELA curriculum. It's a Likert type scale, Likert scale. So it went from strongly agree to strongly disagree. They could pick whether they agreed with the statement, the degree to which they agreed with the statement. 55% of our teachers agreed and 35% disagreed with that statement. Grade level appropriate, the question said the materials and activities are appropriate for the grade levels. 64% of our teachers agreed that it was grade level appropriate. 28% disagreed with that statement. There was adequate training provided for me to use the new ELA curriculum. 56% of our teachers agreed and 27% disagreed. I would recommend the ELA curriculum to a colleague. This one was the most divided question. 37% agreed, 40% disagreed, and 23% was neutral on that.
That gives me a 64% of not a positive. Okay, so we have 64% are not, because we have 37% agree, 23% are neutral, and 40 disagree. So 63% are sitting on the fence of the 73% of the people that responded to us.
Yeah,
Right.
I just would interject. I do think that's unusual, but I think it's because we're doing this so early. The first year, again, people are just overwhelmed by a new curriculum like this. And I think that's part of it. We're getting a lot more positive feedback from them now that they're getting, with the additional understanding of things that they didn't understand before. The coaches are getting a lot of positive feedback from what they're doing, and I think that if we were to do this again, it would probably be different.
But when we bring a new program on, I thought all these bells and whistles and all these trainers and everything's going to be here. So really your first should be, we're getting bang for our bucket first, and it's this type of would be a
No,
little
that's
later.
not what happens. The first year, you're overwhelmed by it because it's so much, especially ELA, because it's a lot. But you got to remember, this was a curriculum the teachers chose.
Sure, but if they're overwhelmed, we should have support in place, so this number isn't out there, so there's something out there that's,
I can
makes
tell
me
you,
a little nervous here.
these
when I see
teachers are
this.
getting more support in this curriculum than I've ever given in my entire career.
Yeah, but it's still
A lot of places I've been at, I've been at some of those nationally recognized school districts that you talk about. Their feeling is that you're certified teachers, we don't need to give you PD. You should understand how to take care of a curriculum and learn it. We don't even provide it. All we would do is give them the initial PD on what the materials are. We would expect them to figure out the rest of it. We didn't do all this training. This is very unusual. our teachers have gotten a lot of PD.
Well, and I will add, I do think the second year, that number, I'm sure will go up if you ask them this same question in a year. I'm confident it will. They do, I mean, they did feel like that the training was adequate, so it's an unusual question to ask. I'm glad that you asked it. Would they recommend it? That's not something we typically ask teachers to do. They're not, they're not in the business of recommending curriculum to other teachers, other districts. But what I do like that this shows, and I applaud you for including it, is I think we're starting to see that our teachers are not scared to answer honestly. And I think in the past with some surveys, and there was always a fear that, geez, I better answer this in the right way. So this is probably their honest answer, and I'm glad to see it because I think it shows a change from perhaps some past surveys that we've done. So I'm trying to look at the bright side. Thanks.
Yeah, and it gives us a baseline to keep going up.
And I did talk to the principals about it, and if any of you want to comment, please do. And one of the things that the principals commented on is that some of the teachers don't really have an opinion about it yet because it is so new to them, and some of them are new teachers. Would any of you like to comment on that?
My statement was that you just asked a bunch of teachers at intermission if they liked the movie. We've only seen half of it, so I think you have a lot of people that are like, I want to know how this finishes out. I want to see once we finish the training and professional development and we get all of these elements woven in and we're using them in best practices, then I'll give you my full opinion on what I think of it. I think right now you got a lot of people that are on the fence thinking that, okay, there's something here, let me see where it goes.
I can speak to this. As a classroom teacher in 1997, I was asked to adopt a curriculum very similar to this. Actually, it was the old HMH. And I pushed back personally. I didn't want to do it. I liked my literature studies. I didn't have nearly the amount of training that our staff is getting. And it's a third order change. When we think about leadership and all the training that we've had as leaders, when you ask people to shift in such a massive way all at once and give them so many materials all at once, we almost overloaded them. So what we've decided as leaders and with our coaching staff is to scaffold for teachers. So there are some people you can give them everything and they can run with it. There are others that need a little more coaching, a little more time. They're more methodical about what they roll out in their classrooms, so they're doing a little bit slower. And that's the unique thing about teachers. They need to be autonomous to do what works for them with the cohort of kids that they have. And Dr. Schillingberg said earlier, there are 300% of the materials that you would possibly need. Your job as the diagnostic expert in your classroom is to pick what you need for your children and make it work. So they have so many things that they don't even know exist yet because maybe they haven't needed to use them with a specific cohort. Maybe they haven't delved into that yet. But about between years 3 and 5, we will see different responses. I lived it, so I think we just need to give it some time.
Thank you. The next question was the curriculum resources make it easier to differentiate instruction. Half of our teachers agreed, 34% disagreed with that statement. The two open-ended questions, it was about what you like about the curriculum. Most of our teachers had comments that was included in that, and there was a lot of positive comments about the amount of resources, about the assessments that were available, and this is just the most words that was used, the most repeated words. It's a word cloud, so that's what it shows you, but it talked about the online resources. Lots of teachers like the assessments. They talked about the readers, how it's so useful to them. Even though the survey didn't say much about differentiated instruction, there was a lot of comments about that how the resources helped them with the grade level students. What we would like to improve, there were some comments that were contradictory to the positive things too, so it's different people responding to it. There were comments about the lack of online resources. We already talked about that the technology was not available, so they couldn't use all of those resources. There was also comments about the rigor of for the high-level students because it's mostly grade-level content, so to cross that grade-level barrier, It was difficult for some of the teachers. Most of the comments were about the lack of online access and not being able to use it to the full extent. So that's the survey. My next part, this is data that you already have. Dr. Thompson had sent this to you when the data came out, but was requested as part of this presentation, so I've included the ELA data. The slide has a lot of information. It has data from 2015 to 2018. The first set of bar graphs on the right side is the state, and then the district average, and then we have all our elementary schools for third grade ELA. Third grade ELA had a significant drop this year, but however, we are 16 points above our state average.
Yeah, but if I may interject, second and third grade is where this independent reading is really, really important. So I expected kind of to see a dip in second grade, and I expected to sort of see a dip in sixth grade when kids really stop. Seventh grade, eighth grade, they kind of stop independent reading too. So third grade, that would be a good, if you were looking at extending AR and STAR, third grade would be a good grade, and second grade as well, I would say, but that's, you guys can discuss that later.
All right, thank you. Grade 4, we gained 2 points. We are significantly above the state average again. The district average is at 70. And again, we gained one of the grades that we gained points on. Grade 5, again, 1 point. We gained a point from last year. We went from 65 to 66. All our grades are significantly above grade average, about state average, sorry. Grade 6, again, we lost points there in our average. It went from 67 to 60. The state dipped as well. So there is, it mirrors the state average there.
So Dr. Kirkos, can we go back to fifth grade?
Yeah.
This is just a data thing, and it's minor, but if you look at this, I mean, this is just for us, and as we're looking at data, I think if you count them up, I think it was fifth grade, that if you counted the schools that went up, 5 actually went down and 4 went up, but you have such big growth, like at Centennial, like a lot, 48 to 72. It kind of skews it a little bit. So you gotta just, there's more than one way to look at the numbers, but yes. I don't know if I would count that as a win or not for this year.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So that's why I've given you all the data so that you can kind of look at it. But for my talking point is on average, how did we do? But I'm happy to explain anything on that slide. Grade 6, again, we lost 7 points. Grade 8, we gained 1 point on average. We are significantly above the state average. The state average went from 34 to 39. We went from 55 to 56, so we kind of stayed the same even though we gained a point, but the state did increase in grade 8. Grade 9, we gained 10 points from last year to this. We went from 50 to 60, and you can see both schools there, so the average is just the average of those 2 schools, unlike when we have all the elementary schools there. Grade 10, again, we gained 10 points. 31 to the state just went 31 to 33. We went 10 points, 42 to 52. Grade 11, we gained 16 points, which is a significant jump for us. We were at 32 the year before. We went up to 48. So overall performance, we had 3 grades go down, 3rd grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade, but 6 grades went up on average.
And I just interject that we're very excited that our high schools, because that's really, we want them to leave Higley doing really well. And so we're really excited to see that we had such great growth at our high schools.
Okay, so Mr. Glover and Mrs. Kaler, you have seen this before at the superintendent visit last year, so bear with me. So I've been asked to present what we do with our quarterly data. So you've seen kind of from the teacher side what they do from a week-to-week basis. This is what we do as a school after each of those big, as Mr. Glover mentioned, summative type assessments. We still treat them as a formative assessment in the sense that we dissect that data and we work things back into instruction based off of what we're seeing. So one of the things we do at our school is we call it a virtual data folder, and we take from Galileo. I go in and I take every report that I find pertinent from Galileo. If you haven't used it before, it's a pretty extensive program. And then I turn it into Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or PDFs or whatever is most user-friendly, and I plop it into the grade level folder from there. So the teachers have access to all of that data from that quarterly assessment that is useful for driving their instruction the following quarter. So from there, I'm kind of running this like we run our PLC meetings. We start with a bird's eye view, and then we whittle it down to each individual student, and then we create action plans from there. So this report right here is the intervention alert. Basically what you're looking at is you have the standards on the left-hand side. You have the item count on the right-hand side, and this is from a test last year. We've actually shifted gears on the amount of question items we have per standard. So Mr. Glover, I know you brought up the one question per standard. We have a little more this year. But from here, the teachers can sort using that Excel spreadsheet and determine which standards they did really well with, what they can celebrate, and then also standards that we need to remediate with and spiral back into our instruction moving forward. So this is where we like to start. This report right here is just something that we use quite frequently. So like, for example, it says number 23, that number 23, number 2, and number 27 all pertain to the same standard. Okay, so we sort this report that way. And then from there, if you look at number 23, D was the correct answer, and 92, pushing 93% of our kids answered correctly. Now, what you often see with this report is you might have 50% of your kids answer D, which is the correct answer, and then 40% answered B. Well, B was distracting for some reason, so we're going to dive into what B was, and then we're going to see what that misconception was, and then we're going to address that in the future. So we use this report. Then we like to just look at overall passing percentages, which is similar to what we just looked at district-wide. We'd like to look at how we stacked up compared to the district, compared to other schools, and then also class by class, just to see what percentage of our kids are passing the assessment. Then we dive into the individual students. So we have our teachers actually physically highlight based on proficiency level, and we're looking for trends. Again, we like to celebrate big wins. If we're moving kids in the right direction, if kids are showing growth, if kids that were minimally proficient before are now proficient, things like that, we really like to celebrate and give kudos to our teachers for that. We're also looking for kids that might be regressing or kids that are kind of stagnant too. And this data ends up on a virtual data wall that I'll show you in a minute. Student growth is very important, and we want to make sure that we're not just bringing up our minimally proficient and partially proficient kids, but every single student on our campus is pushed at their individual level. So this report helps show us that. So on the right-hand side is a spreadsheet that shows where those, or what the kids' growth scores were. So if we're looking at this data as a team, we're pinpointing students that are showing negative growth or growth that didn't meet the expected growth. So for example, there's a 9 up there. The expected growth might have been 30. So that kid's still not where they need to be. Therefore, we're going to intervene somehow, some way that next quarter. And then the graph on the left-hand side, that green line, that shows students that, so those little dots, each of those dots is a student. And any dot above that green line represents a student that passed that assessment. And then any dot to the right of the red line demonstrates students that showed recommended growth or expected growth. So ideally, we have all of our students in that first quartile. And so this is just a good snapshot. And then we take this and then dive into the Excel spreadsheet, which is to the right. This is a snip of a virtual data wall that one of our teachers has. So each of those rows represents a student and their performance over time with Galileo Reading, Galileo Math. We also input AZ merit scores. When we were at Power Ranch, Sherry Richards and I and Karen Bacon, we had a data wall, like a physical data wall room with paper. So we've kind of graduated from that. We still think that's a very useful practice, but we like this just because you can see from a longitudinal standpoint, you can see where that kid's been year after year after year. And again, we're looking for growth here. So as you can see under the reading column, a lot of kids are going from red to yellow to green or to blue. And that's what we want to see. We want to see kids that are proficient and above. So after we've dissected all of that data, we come up with action plans for the following quarter. And so for example, we would have taken that first report, the intervention alert that showed how we did on certain standards. We would then put those standards that we needed to work back in on this portion of the action plan. And then we're also going to take a deep look at that standard. What do we need to do to make sure that our kids can master that particular standard? And how are we going to work it back in? Because we have to be deliberate about it, because we might not see it again. We have to be intentional about putting it back into what we're doing. And then the teachers list their lowest performing students and lowest growth students. And this is where we have the meat of our conversation. So how are we going to meet their needs? Are we pulling them back into small groups? We have our intervention times now with our lit coaches that we love. So now we're working our lit coaches in, our gifted coaches in. And then just within grade levels. So we like to walk kids between teachers even and level kids off based on where they're at to meet their needs, to make sure that they're growing appropriately. So this just helps us come up with a game plan. And then this is, again, just a snippet of what standards we need to work back in, what standards are coming up. And we're looking for ways to maybe marry standards together that work well together. And we just want the teachers thinking long-term in terms of putting this together. That's my portion.
Well, Mr. Bickle, I told you while I was at your school how much I loved this, and I love that you brought it to us again today. And I know that there's other schools that do something very similar, and or they might still, I think Mr. Mercado has the data walls in his school. So I just love that every student, it just shows that they matter to us and that you are tracking them so very well. And I love seeing this, and I hope these are the kind of things I wish our community would see, that man, we are detailed and we care about every student, where they're at and where they're going. So I just thank you for bringing this to us.
Absolutely, thank you.
I love seeing it too, and I saw it when it was at Power Ranch, like the paper.
Yeah.
How much time does it take you to do that?
What piece?
Well, all of it. No, for your student growth and for your virtual data walls, to pull that information together.
So me taking it from Galileo and putting it.
Would you have been helped if you had a data warehouse to put all this stuff together?
Yes, please. If we could do that, that'd be amazing. I would say 6-7 hours in assessment. I take a big chunk of time to do that. Part of that is me gawking at the data, or saying, hey, we have some holes here and there. But it takes some time. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, could you click it? Just one last click there. So any final questions, comments?
In reference to excellent presentation, I enjoyed everything this evening. It's very informative. A couple things I just picked up on is I see that as we look through and continue with this program, is we're struggling with technology in reference to this, and I hope we're addressing that concern we have on that. And also, is any surveys that we do that we are perhaps creative in reference to the response, so that when we get a response, it's just not an average, because it just concerns me when you have an average response that your community of teachers, your culture is not that they have an input in reference to the decision-making process. So it kind of may tell me that, well, they say, well, you know, if I answer this, it really doesn't matter, okay? But it does matter in Higley. Everybody matters in Higley. So I think it's important that they are comfortable and we do whatever it takes. You know, I know when children have things to bring out back, they get a pizza party. I don't care, you know, those type of things. But you guys are creative, okay? And the principals are creative. But I think for us to get a true response to what's happening out there, I like to just to see the numbers a little bit higher in
Yeah,
reference
I
to
agree.
that. So.
I'd like to see us, you know, get a better response from our teachers.
Well, and I appreciate everyone's work on this. I know it wasn't easy. I know it was time consuming. I know Dr. Schillingberg's like, it's early, but we asked for this because we want to make sure that you're getting the support you need right off the bat. We want to make sure, you know, we want to have the discussions about AR, and it's not that anyone's doing anything right or anything wrong. We need to, I know the support of this board is important, and we need to make sure that our schools and our teachers and our staff have what they need. And I have seen it, and I don't want to be 5 and 6 years down the road where we were unsuccessful with HMH, or where so many different things are happening that we can't get a true picture of the growth and doing all that. We want to make sure that what needs to be in place is in place. And like you said, this is a good baseline, and that way we can come back and revisit it. Then when we get those responses from the teachers that are like, no, I don't like this, we can have discussions, not tracking who's replying how, but then it can prompt discussions with our principals. Okay, you know, 30% across our district said they're not liking this curriculum. Let's find out why. Most of the time it's because in some areas there may be a lack of training. Somebody might not understand it. They don't know how to use it. Sometimes we're using materials and programs. I do it all the time with my phone. I'm like, I take the long way. And people are going, did you know you could just do this? And I said, wow, that's so much easier. Now I don't dread doing that. Maybe I'll do that more often. So it just may be that not everyone is being touched that needs to make sure that they're being successful. And not that any of our coaches or anything aren't doing that intentionally. Sometimes people just don't make themselves available either. And so it would really be following up to make sure that we are providing what our coaches need. We are providing what our teachers need. We're providing what our students need, and that we're doing it in the best way we can. So I know it was a big presentation, and I appreciate it. And I know it is a little premature to say it's working, it's not working, and I don't think that's what we're looking for. I think we're looking for, we know it's a big deal. We know these elementaries, you had ELA, you had math. We have science and social studies coming, and it's not our teachers' fault that it's been so long, so we're trying to get everyone caught up on materials and the appropriate curriculum so they don't have to spend their time pulling their own things together. So we just want to make sure that your teachers understand if they are struggling with something, go to their literacy coaches, go to their principals, that it is important to us to make sure that we have the processes and support in place to make them successful. We adopted these programs to make their lives easier, to help not having to take so much of their time. And if it's not working for them, encourage them, talk to your coach. And I know the response is, well, they are. Well, they are, or maybe they're not, and they're responding in this survey, so maybe not everybody. So continue that support. I know you guys are doing a great job. Continue that message. We're here to support them. We want them to be successful. And however we can do it, sometimes it is just a small bit of knowledge that they were missing, and it can change their whole perspective on something. So I appreciate everyone's time and effort putting this presentation together, so it gives us a better idea of, after that first year implementation, where are we at? How are we supporting? And are we doing everything that we need to be? So.
Thank you. And I just want to put in a plug for HMH and Lisa, because they have come out twice with a national team to really help us dig into the data that they have, their resources to show us the usage of their online materials and those kind of things to help us make some decisions on where we need some support for our teachers. So that's been fantastic. We appreciate that.
I'm gonna be brief, but I'm gonna repeat some of those things because I want you guys to sort of hear it, because so that we're all on the same page. But no, it's I want people to know where we stand. But first, I know we did talk about an implementation dip, and that's fair, and that's a real thing. I think it's, people want to hedge their bets, but there wasn't a dip. I mean, it was kind of all over the place. But I know, and I think we should agree, when we, the standards are the standards. They have not changed. So I liken it to, like if a Major League Baseball player was going to start taking up golf, there would be a dip there. But like when I was a kid, I had a old beat up wooden bat, Parks and Rec League, and then I made the All-Star team. My dad bought me a shiny metal nice bat, which I still have. It's more like that, I think. And so the high schools really, the growth is good, and I expect to see everybody start to grow. But I do also want to thank everybody for staying late. We're human. The feedback you're giving us, we want to know that our decisions are having the intended consequence. And I know it was a lot of work to put all that together. We want to be supportive. It may not seem like, may not always seem like it, but we do, and we understand that you guys have really difficult jobs leading a team of teachers to implement, two in a row now. But I'm really glad to see different groups working together on this, and that everybody pitched in, because, we are all on the same team. We just want to open up opportunities for students to succeed, and when we keep that in mind, I think every decision we make, we can live with. So thank you again for staying late, and Patty Gleason, we haven't forgotten about you.
And I appreciate that, your appreciation. I just want to give my appreciation, because I think that the work that the Ed Service Department, to our coaches, to our principals, to our teachers, what they've done to make all this work, because it is such an enormous task. And you see, this was just the presentation. What they're actually doing out in the buildings is just enormous. And we have identified areas we need to grow, but we certainly have a lot of areas to celebrate. So we're excited about that. So thank you.
And one last remark on that is, thank you so much for your very open and honest feedback. It's important, and I know once upon a time it was like, ooh, I'm not going to say anything because it's not what I think they want to hear. So we appreciate that, because that helps us grow. It helps us support you, and it's recognized. So thank you for having the conversation with us and having that openness and communication. It's appreciated for sure. Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to We're going to go on to 5.2, and Ms. Gleason, I'm so sorry. We're going to take a moment.
Yes.
I will be excusing myself due to a conflict of interest, and so we're going to take a brief break, and then Mrs. Kaler will finish the meeting.
hear your shorter
Yes.
presentation.
I promise to do my best.
Ms. Gleason, I would just like to tell you that I looked through the program, the presentation, and you did an outstanding, very detailed information, everything, and I appreciate everything you did. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Tovich, and I know it has a lot to do with Justin Weston. He is my wingman tonight, so for sure. So, good evening, Vice President Kaler and members of the board. We are here tonight to present a proposal today for increasing our preschool tuition for the 1920 school year. What I'd like to show you next is right now our current process. Again, I want to give you a little bit of detail too as to how we arrived at that decision to ask for this increase. So right now our revenues for the 18-19 school year, all preschool revenues are coded to the site for which they're received. In previous years, the funds were deposited into one revenue line. Our expenditures are currently tracked by site, so Cooley and Sussman are separated. Preschool expenses currently include the following: our payroll expenses, of course, compensation and benefits, bank service expenses, travel, conferences, and training, and then our supplies. And you can see the box is actually our 17-18 preschool expenditures for last year. Okay, these are our current preschool tuition rates. We've had these tuition rates for the last 3 years. Okay. And we did break them down per hour because I know a lot of the programs that we're comparing to do not have the same amount of hours that we do in our programs. Okay, good, good. All right, so our neighboring program tuition, we checked Chandler. Again, we looked at their pre-K full day and the ones that were comparable to the programs that we have here in Higley. They do have certified teachers in all of their classes. However, they don't offer any specialized programs like we do here in Higley. So they do not have a gifted or any language classes that they offer at the preschool level. Gilbert, again, they just have their kindergarten prep half-day program with certified teachers. Their building blocks full day, which is comparable to our full day, they do not have certified teachers. It's pretty much a child care at that point. And they, again, have no gifted or language classes that they offer. Queen Creek only has the half-day programs, 2.5 hours per day. Again, no gifted or language offered. And then Mesa, they have a preschool half-day that is only Monday through Thursday, 3 hours per day, and then their Montessori full day is what we compare to ours. Again, no gifted or language classes offered. And then again, you can see this is the tuition proposal that we have.
Mrs. Gleason, just looking at this alone, it just shows me how you blow everybody.
Thank you, thank you. And I have to tell you too, that as of last Tuesday, we are at 928 students enrolled between both our SPED preschool and our gen ed preschool. When we first opened back in 2013, after that first year, we had about 357 enrolled at the end of that year. So we've had tremendous growth over these years, and the programs that we're developing just continue to get better and better.
Well, I'm going to add in here, because I think it's the time. I've told you this before, but I tell everybody, and I get around to the schools quite a bit. Even with the minor increase, this is the best value in the state easily for what those kids get and what we offer, and it's a phenomenal program that you run, and it is worth every single penny. I almost went back and had kids again just so I could send them through there, but
that is an honor.
Yeah.
I feel very blessed that you would say that.
That's what my wife said.
A very dedicated staff, honest to goodness, and they're always wanting to do better and to do more. All right, so I wanted to remind you too that we still have the tuition or the tuition discount for all of our staff in Higley, so it's 20%. And we do make scholarships available to families, employees that may need that additional assistance. I believe there's 2 families right now that we are helping with additional scholarships. And we do have, we waive the registration fee for all of our employees as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, now this is the part I'm going to call Justin up to join me, and he's got all this information about the actual.
Good evening. You may remember we did this presentation back in February, so a lot of this information in terms of what's currently not in the process is the same going into this year. The district is currently paying the following expenses for the program, which include the lease, the utilities, and then the energy, water, and trash collection. In terms of space for those programs, each building is the same. You'll see there that the percentage of total square feet that's being used by each preschool program is 20.68%. So when we allocate the expenses and the lease payments that we would say that the program would be responsible for, that's the basis that we're using to allocate those expenses. We give you a 3-year breakdown, 15-16 to last year, 17-18. You can see the utility costs for each year and their totals respectively. So the utility costs over the last 3 years have been relatively level. They've been anywhere between $94,000 and $98,000. The lease as of right now as well, we're looking at 3.2 to 3.4 million. And so each year there's a breakdown of what the program would be covering in terms of the utilities and the lease expense if that were the case. So the question that we asked would, how would those costs impact the preschool budget? This slide is exactly the same. It shows that our beginning balances for the year, what the revenues were that we brought in, the expenditures, and then that we had an excess for the 15-16 year. And without the utilities and the lease, you're looking at 456 is what we rolled over. In the case that the program had to cover the utilities and the lease allocation, we would have been in the red, 317,000. Going into the next year, starting off with those rollover balances, our revenues were at 1.681, and the expenditures were 1.6 million. We had an excess again that year of 81,540.04, and again you can see if we would have included the utilities and the lease, we would have been over $1 million in the hole for that going forward. But we carried over 538 without those expenditures included. And then what we've done is we have finalized the 17-18 numbers for you so that you can see in the first column where it says current practice, that's what we've been tracking currently. So we started off with 538, we brought in 1.864, and we had expenditures just shy of $2 million for the program last year. So we dipped into a little bit of that reserve that we held, ending at 406. If we would have included the utilities and the lease all 3 years, you can see at the bottom there, we would be then in the hole almost $2 million. Then we took a look at the current year starting off fresh with no rollover balance. And again, you can see if we would have included utilities, the lease allocation, and then what we overspent for the year, we would have been almost $1 million over. And then if we're just looking at covering utilities, we still would have been about $230,000 overspent for the last year. This is to kind of give you an idea of our revenue trends. As Ms. Gleason shared with you, the program has grown tremendously over the last few years. And what we wanted to kind of show you, and again remind you, the billing cycles have been different each year. We've now got it to a point where we're billing at the beginning of the year in July, and then the next payment is in September. And then we collect all the way throughout the rest of the year. One thing that I wanted to point out for the 17-18 year, we did have revenues of 1.9 million. However, we did have a large refund for the 1 week that we were closed down for the Red for Ed movement. So that amount being taken out of that kind of had a big impact for the year as well. And then ending for the year, we did roll over $406,000. So we also have the indirect costs that are associated with the program. And again, we've got the community education staff that handles the billing and the scheduling and getting enrollments done. And then again, we had some other items that were approved from the preschool budget, which included the portable air conditioners and other items that were approved. And then the additional indirect costs that weren't paid, include finance, human resources, maintenance, and payroll. And then again, that we're looking at establishing an overhead rate so that we can reclaim some of those costs. There was a lot of questions before about maybe some of the indirect revenue that we're getting off of the students once they are advancing forward into the kindergarten program and then the first grade areas. So in the 16-17 year, we had 65 students that were qualified to be out of our district. Going into the 17-18 year, of those 65, 29 of them stayed within the district as out-of-district students. Our ADM for that year was 37, 29, 31, but because they are in kindergarten, we only get half of that. And so indirectly, we benefited an additional 54,000 that year. Now, if you look forward to the 17-18 year, we had 83 students that were enrolled in the program. And then if you dip into this year, we've got 33 students that enrolled in kindergarten. And of the 29 that were in kindergarten the prior year, 23 of them went to first grade. And so combining the ADM that we receive for the kindergarten students and then the full ADM for the first grade students, we actually have revenues of 158,000 indirectly.
Thank you. Any questions?
Vice President Kaler, members of the board, I would also like to say some of the issues compounding the reason for the tuition increase would include Proposition 206. So many of our lower classified employees also had to get between a 20 and 30% raise from the time Proposition 206 was put into effect until now, which is great for those employees. We're very happy for them, but it also bears cost upon the district. And also the Governor Ducey's proposal of the 20 by 2020 would increase the cost since the inception of the program, plus the raises we've already given, to about 26% teacher raises also. So that's great for our teachers, but being a cash positive program, we need to also increase our costs for those reasons.
Yes, thank you. And when does registration start for you for next year, Mrs. Gleason?
In January.
In January. So
Yes.
is this coming back, Dr. Thomason, in December? Okay. So thank you so much. Appreciate your help. And with that, I move that we adjourn our meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.